Really appreciate it. We had a good number of people show interest in this, and I got a couple of cool announcements that I'll share with you here in a minute. That's cool for me. I hope it's cool for you too. But as I mentioned, I've had little health issues, so that's why I've been kind of uh, gone for a while. Um, and by all means, am back to, I don't know, back to my fighting weight is the term where. Um, So yeah, so it's been an interesting last couple of months, as we all know, all the things that have happened and such. And I've kind of gone this direction, like a lot of educators, of taking to the Zoom or the different softwares that allow for teaching. So I'll just start with my big announcement is that I've created I have a new domain that's called the Creative Edge .live. I'll put it up on the video here towards the end, so please write it down. It's going to be my site where you can go to get edumacated on all this kind of fun stuff. Yep, going to the competition with the all the guys that already put stuff out there, but I got a lot to say, so I want to share it with you. At first, my plans are um, to be able to. My plan is to launch it around the 1st of August. That might be a little bit brave, but because I've got another little trip to make back to Illinois with family. But nevertheless, the Creative Edge .live is going to be the place where I'll have tutorials. It'll be a subscription site, so there'll be a fee. I was okay. I can start out with that. I have no problem with that. And I looked at, for example, what Scott Kelby's doing, and his top of the line membership is like $20 a month, which is very reasonable. But he also has over 700 videos, so I'm not there yet. I probably have enough to fill up that many videos, but I haven't done it yet, so bear with me. So it's going to be a freebie for a while, and somewhere down the line, I'm hoping. But what I'll do is I've got all your names, emails. I'll announce it to you when it happens, and I'll give you a chance to go and sign up on that. And for those of you who sign up in a reasonable amount of time, there'll be some specials and probably good special rates up front. And I don't know, I'm just kind of talking out of my wrong side of my mouth right now, but lots of great ideas coming up there. So I've got all kinds of, I had a lot of time to put a lot of video ideas together. I'm going to start shooting a lot of these with my good friend Olin Jones. Olin, I don't know if you're in tonight, but we're talking about doing some cool videos, just all kinds of different stuff. I watch a lot of what the other guys are doing, and I'm going to try and do, as usual, different things. Good information, good educational, basic, how-tos, but then some fun, challenging kind of things. Like tonight, for example, when this program is over, I've got a little seeing composition exercise I'll share with you for you guys to go out and practice some different things. And that's another thing. This program tonight is about composition. It's a start. So this is going to be the heavy one, about an hour's worth of what composition is, how to use it, why you need to use it, and some ideas and such. And I'll share with you some of the compositional elements in some images I've done with some little red lines on there so you can see what I'm talking about. Then I'm going to produce short videos over the next, I don't know, probably could be next several weeks on more elements of design, because when you look at the list, there's 60 some design elements on compositional tools, and by all means, it's you would want to sit through the whole video if I did all of them. So I'm going to break it up into short little videos where it'll be 10, 15 minutes of here's the 5 or 6 I'm going to talk about today. Here's some examples. Here's how to do it. And then I'll challenge you to go out and create some of these as well. And so talking about composition, which is obviously the theme for the program tonight, it's very overwhelming for a lot of people, but it's a necessity. Um, and this is hard. I don't want to point a finger at anybody by any means, but I've had dozens of conversations with photographers over my 40-year career, and everybody knows composition. Everybody, oh yeah, no problem, I got a handle on it. And then you look at their work, And then they want to know, well, what's the next step? It's always that, what's the next big step? What's the thing I can do to make my images, take them over the top, make them sing, take them to, composition's always the answer. And when I look at people's work so many times, you can see that they need work with composition. Again, I'm not trying to pick anybody. I'm not trying to point any fingers. It's nothing like that. It's a self examination of what you know. And it's those of you who understand composition, who know or work with some of the things, great. I'm glad, but I'm going to also ask you to just kind of lower your guard and just hear me out on all this, because what I've done is oh my gosh, I've done some research, and there are, what did I just find? It was kind of funny when I just searched Google search for composition. I came up with lists of 6, 10, 8, 20, 15 of the essential compositional elements. I'm like, what, really? Okay. And the funny part about most of those is that some of them, of course, overlapped, but so many of them were, what are they talking about? Probably, I would bet more of the people didn't really have a clue as to what they thought they knew about composition. Now, having said that, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be the end all means all of composition, but I have been doing it for 40 years. I have had some wonderful teachers over time. So I hope you'll trust that what I'm going to share with you are some very easy to use, understandable concepts and tools. And I think the best part about it is that this list, as I'll share with you towards the end of the program, of, again, there might be 60 some compositional elements on there. You don't have to use all of them. You don't even have to know all of them. You pick the ones that work best for you and just learn how to use them. And as you go along, you'll start understanding other ones. And the more you shoot, you'll start seeing where they come into play. And what's really, I think, exciting is when you sit down and start looking at your old images, you might start seeing where one image might have 3 or 4 elements in there. You might have leading lines and a rule of thirds and some different different types of elements in there that you weren't even aware of. A lot of composition is in here. It's what we see, and it's what we've learned. There's a favorite quote, I've used it before, and I'll share it with you again here in this program tonight, from Ansel Adams, that just talks about a lot of what we do in life is based on our experiences in life, and that's how we shoot, and that's how the kind of art we like. So let me move forward on this here a little bit. I'm going to share my screen with y'all. All right. Oops, I guess I'm already there. Do I have to log in again? All right. So this program is called Don't Ignore Composition. And again, I don't mean to insult anybody, by all means, but I want you to just lower your guard, if you will, because it's interesting. If I was to list the conversations that trigger emotion, politics, religion, composition fits right in there too. I can't tell you how many, we won't call them heated, but powerful compositional conversations that I've had. I don't know what it is. So all I'm asking you to do is just kind of take a deep breath, hear me out, and you heard that line, take what fits and leave the rest. That's what photography is all about. You do what you understand at that moment, and you do it well until you're ready to move on for something else. That's what composition is all about. But I can tell you what, if you don't understand or use composition, this is why some of your images, all photographers' images, mine included, don't sing every time you, oh man, great scene, beautiful clouds, the sun was fantastic, I had great subject matter in the foreground, the background's fantastic, the leading line, blah, blah, blah. And you sit down and look at it, and the composition doesn't work because you didn't pay attention to it. You didn't stop for a second. And it's like everything else. Those of you who have hung out with me on some of my other workshops and road trips and things, how I'll tell you to, if you're not comfortable with your camera, go sit down in front of your favorite movie, grab your favorite beverage, make an exposure of the TV, and then look at it and tell yourself, I need to overexpose this by a full stop and change the settings on the camera without looking at it. That's how well I want you to know your gear. Some people go, what? I don't know that. Yeah, it's that easy. And that means, same with your tripod, same with any other tool that you use in the field, because when we walk out into that beautiful scene, we're engaging with one side of our brain, and that's the creative side. That's where we understand what we're trying to say. That's where the stories and all of the wonderful feelings that come up from a scene, whether it's a landscape, whether it's a lot of you I know like wildlife, children's photography, pet photography, anything that floats your boat, as my dad used to say. Excuse me. Those are the things that once you connect with those, you don't want to get disconnected. One of my great little, and I just kind of started doing this. I didn't even realize I was doing this, but and those of you have come with me on trips, we'll pull up, even if we're just walking to the end of the pier or walking, 20 feet down a path, I will leave my camera in the car. Now, yes, lately I've been bringing my phone with me because I'm actually capturing some test images so I can get back to the car and look at what equipment to grab and so on. But the idea is to go out there and to get away from the conversation. Radio's off. You don't hear the cars driving by. You don't hear the ambulance siren. You don't hear the airplanes. You're just connecting with nature. You start seeing how the leaves are lying on a pile in the path and how the light is filtering through the trees, and start composing and understanding and connecting with your heart and your soul. And stories come from that. And I'll say that the definitions of composition that I'm going to share with you in a minute are very rigid, but don't forget we want to add our stories and our emotions to this. So if I have to then go down and look at my camera and start figuring, okay, well, if I want to do this, I want this depth of field, I go F8 and then blah, blah, blah. You've now just jumped the other side of your brain, right? You've now just taken away whatever connection that you had. So I want you to know your cameras so well that if you think, oh, I need to set it at this exposure, you just reach up and grab with your thumb and your forefinger or menu or whatever and just do it and not even think about it, and take a shot, test shot, look at it and say, oh, it's a little underexposed. I need to add some more. Boom, I know why I want to move what lever to give me the proper exposure. This is where I'm proud to say I'm at with my gear and have been for a while, and it's what's made me the artist that I am. Not a bragging thing, I don't mean that, but it keeps me connected with the environment. It keeps me connected with the scene. And even better, I mean, I learned this from my dad for photographing people for years in the camera room. The last thing I want to do, I mean, tripods, I live and die by tripods. You guys know that. And I know we hate carrying them around, but I'll tell you what, a tripod keeps you connected to your subject matter. If you have the camera and have to put it in front of your face and then hold it down and look at the image and decide if it's the wrong exposure, blah, 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 you're disconnecting from the subject, whether it's a human being or an animal or a leaf. It seriously sounds silly, but if I can just reach up to my camera and go look at the image real quick and say, yep, I need to give it another stop of exposure, another 2/3 of a stop, whatever. I can turn it down real quick, and there you go. And then I can shoot, look at my image, check my histogram, check my focus, and move on to the next frame. And yes, I am using the equipment. I do have to have some connection with it, but it's so momentary. It's so minute that I know I'm creating the image. I don't have to shoot 5 or 6 just to make sure I've gotten it. You guys, as you guys know, going and shot with me, I pride myself in being able to look at my scene, compose it, work it up, get the exposure I want, maybe take a couple, and move on to the next frame. That's huge. So learning composition is a lot more than just learning the rule of thirds or leading lines or repeating patterns or things like that. It's immersing you more into the art. You become part of the composition, if I may. One of my oh, that didn't go right there. Okay, sorry about that. Ed Weston, one of my favorite photographers back in the days of Ansel Adams and that group, the F64 Club, he said this: to consult the rules of composition before making a picture is a little like consulting law of gravitation before going for a walk. I mean, think about it. You wouldn't ask, get up tomorrow morning and test this out. Decide that you're not going to bother with gravity. Go for a walk, see what happens. And you're all kind of giggling at me, but as silly as that is, composition is the same thing. If you don't learn it, if you don't understand it, at least it can work against you. And that's where it gets to be where you're not sure why your image doesn't have that impact, and what is it going to take to get to the next level. I can almost tell you 99 times out of 100, composition is the answer. Really, three very simple things that you need to know about composition. First of all, the elements are for real. We're going to get into those in a little bit and show you how I use them. Ignoring them will only work against you. And if you use them, it's going to make your images that much stronger. I mean, I almost want to tell you to create a mantra out of this and repeat this to yourself every time you get out of the car to go shoot something, because it's that simple and it's not that hard. Because there's a lot of good photographs out there, man. I sit and look at all of the, all the different apps and websites. I mean, I have a collection in my bookmarks of photographers' websites that would blow your mind. And it's a lot of fun to see what people do. And it gives me ideas. It lets me see what other people are doing. It lets me compare my work to others. And those of you who know me well know that if I look at something and I like that image, I am not going to go recapture that, because it's like I will maybe go there and try and do something different. That's just what's in my spirit as far as creating something. I really don't like standing in the same footprints as someone else, because that's not original art. It might be a pretty picture, but that's not original art. That's interesting. My backup battery is beeping at me. I hope that's not a problem for you guys hearing that beep. So there's a lot of good photographs out there, and I'll even say there's many great photographs. We've seen them. But what defines a great photograph? It's not just an interesting subject, and it's not just a well-timed capture. Those are all great. And it's certainly not just good, colorful, pretty, and a commonplace scene. It's all about the composition. You can stumble on the most gorgeous sunset with the clouds cooperating, and oh my gosh, everything's just perfect. And if you miss the composition, it's no better than a snapshot. Conversely, I will challenge you to go find a scene that isn't that big a deal. It's maybe not that reaching out and tickling your fancy that easily. Work with it, work with the composition, and create something of unique. I have a whole folder of images that I've done that quite a bit with. Is I'll put myself in an area that initially you'd walk in and go, yeah, there's nothing to photograph here, and boy, you can have some fun. So what we think we know, but do we know what we think? Let that one soak in for a little bit. We've all been taught that composition is what makes for stunning imagery. It's what defines our great photograph from mere snapshots. It entices the viewer into our vision and guides them through the image, allowing them to see and feel the scene as we did, or as we want to convey it to them. Composition allows for us, as the artist, to transmit our thoughts and feelings, to make statements and offer opinions to the viewer about our vision and our art. Sounds like a heavy load to bear. I don't mean for it to be that way. Do we really understand composition, though? Do we understand that it can work against us as well as in our favor? Composition exists whether we understand it, like it, use it, or not. So I challenge you even just to learn these compositional elements. If you decide you don't want to use them, at least you'll know when they're not working for you, or when something is working against what you want to be doing. Let's see, there we go. So composition defines a photograph. This is kind of a basic idea of what composition does. It allows a viewer to see and feel an image as we wish, as what we saw in our mind's eye. It allows the viewer to attach their own memories and feelings to an image. That's why people buy, by the way. Composition is a law. It is real. So great composition, great photographs. Mediocre composition, forget about it. So the definition of composition is an interesting one, because I have not really found a specific definition to directly photographically. I've seen several that some didn't make sense. I did a lot of searching today, actually. But composition can be thought of as an organization of the elements of art according to the principles of art. What? I know, I said that too. No, think of it this way: assembling items in a photograph that tells a story or conveys a feeling or an emotion. That's simply what we're doing. We're telling stories. I don't care what you're photographing, you're telling a story. If it's a single duck sitting on the lake, or if it's a complex image where you're looking into a train station with people moving everywhere with a lot more things to consider: the people, the elements of the building, the atmosphere, the lighting. I mean, as complex as the image might be, it's your job, and I hate to use that word job, but I'm going to throw that at you. It's your job to assemble those elements in that image to make it pleasing. It's also your job to recognize when it's not working. And that's what I think is kind of hard. We pull up to this scene, whatever it might be, just conjure someone up in your head when you've pulled up and it just, wow, it looked great until you started shooting, you couldn't figure it out. It's that sometimes it just doesn't work. I've come up on some beautiful lighting landscape scenes where we just couldn't put the right elements together. For whatever reason, it was just not working. It can be a physical thing where the elements might be that you'd like to use are far apart. It could be a psychological thing where you just might not be in it. You might be thinking about the job or the family or something else. How do I pay the bills if I can't take pictures, right? So the word assembly, I think, is a very good reference here, because that's what we're trying to do, is to assemble the parts of an image in a way that is compelling, in a way that tells a story, in a way that makes it more of an interesting thing. I just hit the wrong button here. Like, what am I doing? So what is composition in photography? Well, it's a suggestion of how to view a photograph. So again, we come upon these beautiful scenes, and the beauty of the scene in and of itself is more times than not enough. Okay, let that one sink in for a little bit, because we've all seen it. We've gotten to the sunset at the right time. We've gotten there when the birds are in the pond or the ducks are there, or we've been able to arrive at the right time in the morning when the sun hits the mountainside and it just lights up. But there's something about the image that we're just not able to capture. So it helps an artist tell a story or convey a message. Again, every photograph that I have, that I've created, that's successful, and I mean successful is a pretty broad term, whether it's just somebody likes it, somebody bought it, I did well in a competition, and so on. I can guarantee you comes back to the what's the word we're looking at? Composition. It's a subliminal suggestion as to how to feel about an image, and it creates thoughts or stories in the viewer's mind. So it's either your story or their story, but your objective is to make it so that it happens. So here's my favorite quote from Ansel Adams. I've used this before. You don't make a photograph just with a camera. You bring to the act of photography all of the pictures you have seen, the books you have read, and the music you have heard, and the people you have loved. And I don't know if any of you have seen this before, or just it. The first few times I saw it, I thought it was kind of long and involved and whatever. But the more I've read it, the more I've let it sink in. Man, it describes each one of us in our own way as artists, and how we interpret and put back out the imagery that we like to share. But it also, to me, is the key to creating better imagery. It's very important that we relate to and use these tools. Our memories, our experiences are our tools in creating beautiful photography. So why does a photographer need composition? Well, I've kind of mentioned a lot of the reasons already, because it does help an artist convey a certain message or a feeling. Again, you connect with that scene, it allows you to convey what you were feeling, what you were thinking during that particular image. It directs the viewer to see a photograph properly, and I'm properly meaning how you wanted them to see it, that falls in line with your feelings or your emotions that you had when you were creating that. It helps the viewer to understand a photograph, because sometimes we come upon an image or a scene, I should say, and we might connect to it. And again, a lot of that goes back to that Ansel Adams saying that why did we connect? Well, maybe it's something from our history, our past, our family, our friends, an experience we had. But is the viewer going to catch that and grasp that and understand that? Probably not. You are now the conduit between your emotions and the viewer, and this is why composition helps you tell your story. Or better yet, it aids the viewer in connecting with the message or the feeling or the emotions. There's a very cool, I don't know why I can't make that happen every time. So, like I said before, compositional elements are for real. Sounds silly, but they are. But consider them as guidelines, okay? Not rules. This is not a new rule book that you have to learn and you'll be fined on. Well, I'll hunt you down if you break some of the rules, but that's what I think is cool. I mean, we've all had these conversations with young photographers. Hey, I don't follow any rules. I don't bother composition. I don't bother with that. I just go out and shoot from my heart. Okay, BS. I hope you shoot from your heart. I hope you shoot for your emotions, but I hope you're using a little common sense. I mean, obviously, we got to know something to make the camera work right, so we might as well know something to make the guidelines. I mean, I believe that the only rule in photography is that there are no rules. That's the fun part about it. But I will say this, and you guys have heard me say this before, you do need to understand the art before you can go out there and break the rules. You guys get that one? Obviously, you need to know how the camera works, but you also not just knowing what button turns the shutter speed, but knowing when you want a fast shutter or when you need a more depth of field or when you need the light to come from a certain direction or why you need this fence line to guide you into the scene and so on. That's what I'm talking about is once you really can live and breathe those things. And yes, I know I've got 42 years of doing this. Um, and practicing. I mean, it wasn't just like I've been owning a camera that one. I mean, I've practiced this every day, many days. So I do understand that. But that's why I want to share this with you to show you how important it is to be able to just get to these little things that can really take a photograph. So, and I'll just say this with tongue in cheek. The next time you come to me and say, "Hey, how can I get to that next level?" Let's say the word at the same time. Composition, right? So, as guidelines, not rules, right? That's very important. There's a lot to understand, but it's mere suggestions. And that's how you want to keep it. Because if you get to be at a point where you're creating a rule book, art is not your thing, simply said. So, good composition offers the viewer opportunities. You're creating an image maybe based on a story in your mind, an experience that you've had, or something that just comes to your mind as you're looking at a scene. Not every photograph I've done is part of my life in terms of something that's happened to me. No, I'd say easily, wow, 80, 90% of the photographs I create have stories, but it's the story I created because of that photograph, because of what I saw in there. Sure, it's maybe tied back to an experience I had, but good composition offers the viewer these opportunities to create their own stories and their own conjectures from a scene. Suggests possibilities in an image, creates story opportunities, and the stories can be the artists or the viewers. I think that's very cool. So really, there's two influences on composition that I think are. This is where it starts dividing, and I'm going to talk about the elements later on and how some of them exist as they sit, or others exist in your mind as we see them. I don't know if that makes sense yet, but we'll hopefully clear that up. And what you've got here is we have these two influences on composition. One of them will convey your story. It's what you want to say with a photograph. Whatever the photograph is, it's your story. It's the message you want to convey. The other one that I find even more compelling, and honestly, it's easier to create, but I think sometimes more difficult to get to the point, is to create an image that attracts the viewer and they attach their own story to it, that pulls in an experience they've had in their lives. For example, one time I was doing a show I forget where I was, but I was kind of talking to everybody at one time and couldn't get around. And I noticed an elderly lady standing over by one of my black and white images. Actually, it's in the show here that I'm going to share with you in a little bit. If I remember to point it out. And I just couldn't get over there. And oh, somebody grabbed my arm, and I felt kind of bad because she kind of looked at me, and I could tell she had questions. I finally got over there, and I got there, and she had tears in her eyes. And of course, dumb me, I'm thinking, oh, she's mad at me because I couldn't get over here. No, that's not it at all. She was, she she put her hand on my arm and said, thank you for bringing back these memories. This is exactly like the outbuilding that my grandfather had when my brother and I were little kids. And we used to go in there, and he would show us how he made chessboards and checkerboards, and we'd play, and he'd make these little wooden dolls, with the strings on, little marionettes, and he would make them for us. And it was because it was an old outbuilding built with oak planks, and it had a huge maple tree branch just draped over it, and it was very secluded. And yet it housed so many memories for this woman. It was just, I mean, I stood there and got all teary-eyed. And unfortunately, I would love to be able to sell my photographs for tears, but you can't pay the bills with that. But having said that, that's kind of what I'm talking about. I created this image as I saw it, with the flow of the tree and the story of you know the puppet maker in my mind is what I thought was the story. I could see, we'll go as far as say Geppetto was in there creating these puppets. And yet this woman came along and had a story, interestingly enough, similar to that. But that's what I think makes a lot of my photographs successful and people want to buy them, is because I've put this heartfelt feeling into the scene so that they can connect their own stories to it. And that to me is huge. Absolutely. The psychology of composition. This is one of those, if you look this up, I challenge you to do this. Go to Wikipedia and look up the psychology of composition. You'll stop reading after one or two paragraphs. It's just so, it's true, but it's very uninteresting. So I try to boil it down into these 4 lines, and I hope this helps, because it's huge. Psychology and composition is huge, and that's what will sell your pictures, is connecting the psychology and the emotions of your viewer to your imagery, and that's the big challenge. So they have to be very personal. Many years ago, and I've been photographing for years, photographing business, high school seniors, weddings, and being successful and doing a very good job at it. And when I started photographing the landscape, I'd always had an interest in it, and I always loved Ansel Adams' work. And when I finally started doing that, it was a wonderful, a very wonderful, what do I want to say, experience, I guess. And all of a sudden, I totally connected with photography and the imagery in a different way. When you're photographing people, you have the connection, you have smiles or no smiles, and you have almost an instant if the gratification if the picture was good or not. But when you sit on a hillside and you watch the clouds to move in the right direction, and to get the right light on the mountainside, or wait for the herd of elk to come into play in the right position, you have a lot of time to think. You have a lot of time to reflect, and it becomes very personal. You have a lot of time to look at the elements in front of you, and it's just really a very, very interesting, fun way of doing it. But it also is very personal. That's why I will tell you not to attach these rules. I hate to use the word rules, but these compositional suggestions as hard and fast rules. Because if the image works in your mind and your heart, it works. So using the elements that you relate to, again, I don't know, there's 40, 50, 60 of them, who knows? If you look them up on the computer, you'll find dozens of them, and it's very frustrating. You connect with the ones, this is exactly the same principle as your photography. You connect with the ones that talk to you. You connect the ones that you feel comfortable with. And guess what? You'll learn them a lot faster as well. You'll understand them quicker. You'll remember them, and it'll be easier to use. Again, as I mentioned, I've got a little exercise I'll share with you at the end of this talk, about how to go out and exercise learning these elements. And somebody have my attention here? Okay, sorry, I heard somebody trying to get my attention. Anyways, So, but what makes an image very powerful is using more than one element. And that's what I think is fun as I go back, as I started really, really learning, because I shot for many years before I understood composition. It's just one of the things that we do. It's not something that you sit down and actually choose to learn. It just usually isn't. I started looking back at my image and realizing that I connected in many ways with many elements just out of the pure art and desire to create. So that's a good thing. That's a positive. It's in us. We just need to tap into it and use it to our advantage. So I'll go back and look at my images, and I can come some images. There'll be 5 or 6 elements of design in there, which is very cool. Elements of composition. But you only need to get comfy with a few of them, as I said. All right. For some reason, I can't get this to move forward here. There we go. So don't get panicky. Don't reach for your pencil. I'm going to give you a link where this list is because this is only the first page. These are, and I'll say by no means in any order, except I will say that the first 6 are the very basic fundamental elements of composition that have been around and taught. That you go to a fine arts school, and these are the first 6 are the ones that they'll teach you. You talk to any fine art black and white photographer, and these will be the elements that they've been drilled on for years and will use in their work. The rest of them are equally as important. I will, again, I'm going to show you, I've picked out about, I forget, 5 or 6 of these. I'll show you some samples of images and how it works and answer your questions on a lot of these as well. Again, as I mentioned, my little plan is to put out some short videos with additional ones of these so that you can sit down for 10 minutes and learn something new and not have it be overwhelming. And you'll see how my little called seeing composition exercise plays into this. Matter of fact, I'm going to suggest that when you see each new video, you run out and do a few images of those new elements of composition that you've learned and take it as what works. Some of them I struggle with. Matter of fact, tonight, I'm going to share with you some, see, my mind just went blank, some framing techniques. I don't use that one. I could not find many images that actually had framing in there. So it just shows you how you don't have to use all of these. But as you start to understand them, you'll grasp onto your favorites. So I have a link here at the end of this that will take you to, or you can just remember, go to the soulroadtrips.com / I forget the link. It's on here. It's coming up. Bear with me. You can download this PDF with all of these on here, all of the list. And again, in my little upcoming short videos, we'll go into more explanation for each one of these. So all I ask you to do is just grab onto the ones that you think. So here's a few more. You can see over here that we've heard about the golden triangle, the golden ratio, the Fibonacci sequence. Those are very powerful. They're also a lot harder to understand and to grasp. And I just challenge you to understand them because the Fibonacci sequence works within the golden ratio. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I find it fascinating. I don't go out and compose with the golden ratio. I've tried. It's too frustrating. But repetition, textures, patterns, we use that all the time. Fill the frame. There's different perspectives on that, and so on and so forth. And then I say more because every time I think I've got the list, somebody throws something else out there at it. Here's the link. I don't think that this is a live link for you watching, but you can actually go to soulroadtrips.com/resources, and you'll find several documents that I've posted up there. One of them is this list of elements here, all these. No descriptions, just the list, but we're going to get into all that too as we go along. You'll also find the 12 elements of design, which I find to be, and I've got a webinar coming up about that I think you'll enjoy, which is kind of something that, if you haven't heard of that, it's a process, if you will, that we use to judge photographs in the Professional Photographers of America Association. So it's just kind of a guideline to make the judging uniform, but it's a phenomenal collection of 12 elements that, frankly, I kind of live and die by as I'm creating my imagery, and that link is also on that page. So by all means, go there and look at that. So tonight I just want to chat with you and show you some images of these guys here. I think I may have one more I forgot about, but so let's just talk quickly. So the rule of thirds, we've all heard about that one, right? That one is boy, it's very subjective because it is not the compositional element to end all compositional elements, as a lot of articles I found will say. I mean, I found articles that said, hey, you don't need to know anything else about composition as long as you use the rule of thirds. Horse pucky. The rule of thirds is great when it works, but if it doesn't work in your scene and you can't crop it to make it work, it doesn't work. Just putting it on your picture and saying, yep, I divided my picture into 9 segments is not a composition. It's what happens at those points of where they cross, the lines cross, or in the sections. I'm going to show you some pictures and explain that. Rule of thirds. Now it works here because if you look at the line, the bottom third, I have, this is actually, those of you who want to come with me to Alaska in the end of August, we have a wonderful road trip up there. This is Homer. This is the Homer Spit. And it is an absolutely amazing place to photograph and just to be. And the food, as you know, is always good where I go. Notice the bottom third line is on the horizon of the water and the landmass behind that. I also roughly have the mountaintops, give or take, on the other third line. That's enough. You don't have to use everything. The cross points, there's 4 of them, are probably the most powerful. If you can place, and I have another image somewhere, this mountain top is close to that. They don't have to be right on, they can be close enough. But what that does is that draws attention. Ideally and initially draws attention to those power points, which is what in a good composition, I have another, one of my little webinars is going to talk more about the path of composition, as I call it, how to lead someone through a scene to look at it the way you want them to look at it, so they'll experience it the way you want them to experience it. So these points will do that. So I've kind of got the mountaintop close to that point. That's because that's what I want you to look at first. That's the most important part. Then you can wander around. And if you notice the slight pattern fan shape of the clouds fanning up out of that point, it gives us motion to the scene. Here is another way of using the elements. I've divided it into thirds and put an interesting subject in each third. So there's the eagle on the left and the seal on the right. And that just kind of gives you this, yes, it's 2 focal points. That's okay. You can argue that the seal is more of a focal point than the bird. Moot point. It's kind of allows you to go in and understand that that right third is important. I want you to see the seal in there. And then I want you to go look at the bird next. There's a nice spire of a rock there. The center section is not as important, but it obviously has to be there. So we can judge that and look at that later. But the PowerPoints, here we have this bear coming down the hill. And so I've put the bear on that PowerPoint. That's the strongest, any one of those 4 points. Secondarily, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm going to go back a picture. If we can put a land mass or a body of water in an entire third, so the bottom third is filled with the Kachemak Bay, the middle third is filled with the mountains, and the top third is filled with the sky, pretty much. That's another way of using the rule of thirds. So not just the points, but the spaces, either vertically or horizontally. Let's see. This one here, we have the whale's tail at that point, which creates that feeling of importance right there. And then the rule of thirds also goes on to state that there's also one called the rule of odds, which pretty much falls into the same category. Gives us a chance to, we've got a third of the image of the tail and 2/3 of the image are blank, empty space, negative space. Right or wrong way to crop, your call. Center, and I'll get into this one in one of the talks, bullseye or center placement of your image is not wrong, but not powerful. It's too, sometimes it works wonderfully well, but if I was to put this whale tail right in the middle of the image, it tends to knock down the feeling of motion. I've got the whale off to the right. It gives you the sense of, well, the body is more off to the right. It came from the left. You can see the wake of the water as it breaks the tail breaks the water. So it gives us a sense of movement through the scene. So the rule of thirds has many uses. Again, put a subject on the crosshairs, put a main body of land in a section, a third or two-thirds. Again, this kind of keeps us from putting our horizon line right across the middle, which is, I won't say it's a no-no, but it is one of those things that can become very static very quickly. Leading lines are also very popular. These are probably two of the easiest ones to remember and use. And this is very simple. Just look at the arrows. Look at how I've composed the creek bed. Even though the water's coming to me, it doesn't matter. You're entering the photograph in the bottom right corner and following it up, and it's taking it with a nice S-curve out the top left corner of the scene. So there's movement. So you'll constantly be moving your eyes primarily along the creek bed, and then hopefully you'll stop and go over and look at all the pretty flowers along the way as well. Same with how I composed this sand dune scene, is kind of coming from that bottom left corner. That's very powerful as opposed to standing straight on it, having it come up from the middle. Diagonal lines are far more, they show far more movement than vertical and horizontal lines. Vertical and horizontal lines are very powerful, but they can also be very stagnant very quickly. They can be very successful in composition, but you got to work a little harder at those, and it needs to be a very boastful, very proud type of an image in order to pull those off. Something like this, when I'm talking about the soft sands and soft light, it works better to have a diagonal, which invites you into the scene and to go through it. Vertical and horizontal lines tend to make you, they don't invite you in the scene. They tend to stop you in your tracks to look at the image as a whole. Here we have a path that leads us in with this line up the curve of the dune, then over the top, and then you enjoy the rest of the textures in the background. This image here, I've got a lot of things that are, again, leading lines. We have the slopes, edges of the mountain, even the direction of the boat, the reflections of the mountains, all pointing us in towards the red mountains in the background, which are not red at this moment. But it just gives us a direction of, I'm telling the viewer where I want you to look. This is one of my favorite images that I've shot. This is the old Mile High Stadium. And it was interesting, a real quick story. I was hired by the Gates Rubber Company. I used to photograph a lot of their really, really exciting belts and hoses. Every week or so, they would call me and say, hey, we got another box of belts for you to photograph. Oh, it was exciting, but it was a paycheck, right? So one time they called and said, we are going to be in Bronco Stadium. We have a product there and we need to do it. It was the first year the Broncos won the Super Bowl. Of course, they didn't know this. And if you bought 2 bottles of Prestone antifreeze and a radiator hose, you were qualified to win tickets to go to the playoffs that the Broncos made it that year. Whatever. So I went and brought my large format camera in there, 4x5, and I had everything ready. And I get there, and picture a football stadium that's totally empty. There's a person working on stuff over here, something over here, a guy mowing over here, and that's it. We had the whole stadium to ourselves. They set down 2 bottles of Prestone antifreeze and a radiator hose in the middle of the field. I swear to God, we were in the 50-yard line right in the middle of the field, and wanted me to photograph that. Not with the stands in the background, not with the goalpost, not with the scoreboard, just those pieces. And they would put in all those other elements in the poster. So they rented the stadium for 2 hours, and I took about approximately 20 minutes to do the shot for them. And I said, do you mind if I stay? I had the whole stadium to myself with a large format camera. It was a blast. So this is what I saw. This is 4x5 Kodachrome film, and I laid this 4x5 on my desk for I can't tell you how long, until one day it hit me to do the colorization here. And then, but look at the lines of the backs of the seats, the folded up seat themselves, the numbers, even the aisle up in here that goes across, that kind of contradicts. All of this is such a strong composition. I entered this in competition, PPA competition, and it scored a 100, which is absolutely the top of the heap and absolutely phenomenal. This has been one of my favorites. But the composition is very strong because there's so many things that you can look at and just move you around the scene and still come back to that red chair. Orange chair. Again, very simple leading line. Just look at the road that comes up and curves out of the scene. Again, very simple. We have the snowbanks, the fence, all emulating that. So that repetition, here's another element that I haven't mentioned, just repetition of elements strengthens what we've captured. I don't know why I keep getting a stop pattern here. Let's see. All right. So another one I want to share with you, and this is a very easy one for us landscape photographers. And a lot of you probably heard this foreground, middle ground, background thing. The reason for it is it's creating depth. When you walk up to a scene and you photograph just the mountain and the sky and maybe there's no clouds, you're really creating a one-dimensional image. You're not creating depth. So if you can have at least two of those, at least have a middle ground and a foreground, you have now an invitation into the image. So even though I have very little ground in the foreground here, it still gives the viewer an opportunity to feel like they can walk into the scene. If I cropped it up to the bottom of the sand dunes, it tends to shut down. It's not as inviting. So just that little bit of field. Matter of fact, I have spots for this weekend. We're going down there again. Boy, was that a sappy sales pitch. Sorry about that. But having the ground, and then of course the dunes and the mountains, and then the clouds in the background, we have lots of depth here, which gives us that foreground, middle ground, background feeling. Same thing with this one here. We have the grass leading up to the barn. Of course, the barn and the Tetons in the background. There's your depth, and it can, as I've talked about many times, photographs are two-dimensional. It's up to us to create that third dimension with our composition. A little bit simpler or not as obvious, we basically just have the boat in the foreground, but we have the reflection of the rocks as the middle ground, reaching towards the boat that invites us to go from the boat to the rocks and then up to the point of the rock. We have this repetition of the stone, the shape of the rocks being similar. It's a triangle, which is also very pleasing to the psyche. Notice the horizon line is just above center, so as to not stall it out. And I used a heavy vignette to knock down the edges, just to give it more of an art piece feeling, but it gives it a feeling as opposed to just a picture. A little bit more vague, but you guys have all seen the sand dunes, but we have the, so I'm going to turn on my, let's see. Laser pointer. Okay. So we have the foreground here of these dunes in shadow. We have the middle ground with the sunlight hitting it. And then we have the background with the clouds and the dunes and mountains fading into oblivion there. So that, again, it's very subtle, but it gives us depth to the photograph. It invites you to come into the image because it's telling us that there's a distance we can go. This one, again, very subtle, but we have the trees and the rocks in the foreground, and then this row of wonderfully colored rocks in the middle there, and then going from over to this formation and then back to the mountain. So we have created this foreground, middle ground, background feeling to give us that thing. Framing, this is what I was talking about. I've got like three images here, and I don't shoot with this element. I just don't do it. And what it would be is the ones where you've seen, gosh, I saw one the other day. Somebody had taken a picture of Mount Fuji, and they had in the foreground some beautiful cherry blossoms from a tree that was right there in front of them that framed it, kind of, blocked the sky, but it framed it. That's what I'm talking about. Framing is to have an element closer to the camera that is part of the scene, and yet there's a distance. Well, the best I could offer you here was this row of trees, which were very close, and then of course the mountain in the background kind of dwarfs it and shows you, but that's my framing. Again, it's not something that I do very much. I guess we can call this framing. The vines are hugging the front of the car. I don't know. That's maybe cheating a little bit. But again, there's depth. Here's this barn I was talking about. You can see the big old maple tree coming over the barn, and then the barn itself. And this diagonal leads us to the background. This tree gives us more motion, and there's a lot of textures, but there's a lot of movement and tones that make this very popular. Framing, in a sense, I guess I'm framing the building with the tree. I don't know if that's necessarily the correct way to do it, but that's not one of the elements that I use very much. One more here.
Hey, Jeff,
yes.
I just want to pop in real quick and just kind of give you a time check. We are at almost, it's like 2 or 3 minutes before 8 o'clock. So
okay, all right, that's cool. I actually only have a couple more images to show, and then
no worries. I just want to.
No, appreciate that.
No.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. Keep going.
Good. Okay, I will. Here I would use framing as I'm framing the mountain with the trees. I have lines of the bank that lead us into the scene. I have the clouds that are kind of framing it. I'm kind of stretching the word there a little bit, but whatever. Depth of field, this is one of my favorites. Those of you who've gone and shot with me on workshops know that I talk about this quite a bit. I love shallow depth of field. I love having the subject be the element that I want you to see first, and I do that with sharpness in that certain area. So basically, I can't tell you what f-stop or whatever lens I used here. That's probably my 100 millimeter macro here, but the tulip in the foreground here is sharp. It is crisp from front edge to just the back of these petals right here. It's a little soft here, and then of course it goes soft in the back, but we've been able to keep the, and again, this is some more repetition of patterns. These other tulips resemble this tulip, so it invites you to wander through. There's a nice curved line that takes you out through the scene. The couple of tulips in the background I darkened so they wouldn't take over. This is intersecting. This is intersecting, but I made sure that that shadow was a little deeper than the highlight on the edge so that it would have a definite difference. Anytime you cross over elements in a scene, you lose depth. Sometimes it's hard when you're looking at a forest or a field of big rocks, but anytime you have something where there's big elements or even flowers for this matter, if you can just keep moving your camera and separate, give yourself space, like I have from this flower over here. If I would have had blank space over here, I'll show you another flower image I have coming up. But again, it's hard with flowers. So this is more, the depth of field here is greater than this last one because this was only this flower. Here I have these two columbines sharp. This one fades off. And if you look at this one down here, or you look at the green leaves, they're soft. Well, that's creating depth. This is the depth of field does, but it's creating depth in my image so that it gives the viewer of interest. If I shot this at f/22 or greater with a wider lens, I would have had these green leaves and all the dirt and the sticks and all this crap down there all sharp. That does not make my image more better. Ooh, I said it. You guys thought I was going to go on the whole show without saying it. Dave, here's the poppies from the other day. Phil. Again, same thing. I tried very hard to create the image where I had separation between the poppies. This one had a leaf coming down. There's another poppy back there. And I liked the height, so I didn't separate that more. But the lighting allows separation. It's lighter there and darker on the shadow of that poppy. But this creates my depth of field. This is sharp. I think I shot it at f11. And these guys are soft. So I have repetition of colors, of patterns, of shapes. I have several elements here. Even the triangle is a very pleasing shape. Even the triangles from this flower to these flowers and so on. So there's several elements in here in this very simple image. We even have, triangles are very pleasing to the human psyche. Look at the shape of the opening of this flower as a triangle. It's very inviting to the psyche. Let's see real quickly. Depth of field. This worked very well to have these waterfalls sharp and that one. If this would have been soft, I don't think it would have looked, I don't know if proper is the right word, but it wouldn't have been as enticing. One of my favorite shots when we were down in Cuba, we were up on a 4th or 5th floor shooting down the street. And I think the story is told by just everything that's happening here. That's had to be, in my opinion, sharp from one end to the other. This one is just the opposite. The truck is sharp. I think Linda and Mary were standing next to me on this shot. Weren't you, ladies? This was up in Alaska last year or so ago. But the truck needed to be sharp to tell the story, and it was very foggy. So I think the story is helped the fact that it goes into this cloudy nothingness back here. It makes this guy feel even more deserted, more abandoned. And if you look carefully, there's no tires on the thing. The hood is propped up by an old twig. This background going soft like that and almost disappearing creates that sense of loneliness and that loss of life in this scene here. So a couple of things. That's the end of that show. I'll answer questions in a minute. As I mentioned, I've kind of covered these things, but I'll hit them again real quick. Just watch for announcements of the future installments of this type of program. They'll be short and sweet, and they'll be recorded, so you'll be able to go and watch them whenever you can. mark this down, the creativeedge.live will be my new educational source. I'm looking at an August 1st launch date. Don't hold your breath. I'm on youtube.com with some of my tutorials already. I have to say at the moment it's hard to find me, so don't panic. But I've already got like a
year. August 1st, what year?
I'm say it one more time.
August 1st, what year would that be?
Oh, this August 1st of this year. Yeah. I'm sorry, I just wasn't catching what the date you were saying. Then of course, check me out at soulroadtrips.com. We still have some tours planned this year. Next year, I'm adding some different ones. We're looking at an African safari type of a thing. So I am really jazzed about that. So by all means, check that out. So let's see here. Oh yeah, thanks for tuning in. Keep seeing the light. I got to say that. That's part of my thing, right? Let's do this. I'm going to get this out of here and get that out of here. And let me just tell you real quick about stop sharing. So hey, there we are. This is always weird to go away for an hour and talk, and then I come back and I have that fear that you're all going to be gone. At least I'm practicing. So this next, we'll call it a challenge. It's seeing composition. So the exercise is designed to help you learn, and I'm going to post this. I haven't figured out where yet, but I'll put it up so you can see it. Because what I'd like for everybody to do is to partake and share some images with me. So I think what I'll do is I've got your emails. I'll send it to you. Don't worry about it. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to go wander around your favorite park or town center or go to a grocery store or wherever. Hang out in the floral department like I've done in the produce section, and make sure you tell the store manager what you're doing because they'll wonder. All I want you to do is take a 15-minute time frame, and I want you to select one of these compositional elements. Pick leading lines, pick rule of thirds, pick one. And I want you to shoot for 15 minutes and create images that are just that composition. Don't worry about any other ones. Just pick that one specifically and shoot for 15 minutes and create a few images. There's not a competition as to how many. Just create some good ones, but work with one composition element. Take a break, clear your brain. Come back 15 more minutes. You can do it for 30 minutes increments. I don't care. Pick a different compositional element and shoot for just that. Shoot for rule of thirds. Shoot for repetition of patterns. Just shoot with that particular compositional element in mind. Now, I don't suggest to go out and pick one and do it for 2 hours because that will bore the snot out of you after a while. So do either 15 to 30 minute sessions of one element, take a 10-minute break, do another one, and maybe only do 3 or 4 in a session when you're out there, because it can get to be, when you start feeling like this is getting a little laborious, you're not learning, you're just forcing. That doesn't help. So process the images and study the elements. Create yourself a folder of each one of the elements and just study them and see what you're learning. See how, as you go along, how much more. It's not so much about, I'm able to capture that rule of third, but it's how well did you use it to convey the message of your image? How well did you create that leading line to take the viewer to that point of focus, the story that you want them to see? So let's see, I had a little suggestion here. So just repeating myself, don't go out for a whole afternoon and try and do it. You'll drive yourself nuts. You won't do it again. Just go in there, find a spot, whatever it might be, challenge yourself to one element, shoot for 15 to 30 minutes, take a break, do maybe 3 or 4 elements, and then take a break and then go look at them, and then we'll play from there. So, all right, guys, thank you. I know I went on for quite a bit. I hope you've got something out of it.
There's a few questions.
Yes, please do it. Shoot.
Okay, so, so I'm going to go first. I have a question that's not on the list of other questions.
All right.
It's close to what you just presented. You did that quartet of poppies. Okay, so here's my dilemma. I go to the poppy field and I see a million poppies.
Lots of poppies, yeah.
And it is always very difficult for me to figure out, like I'll look for the 1 or the 3 or the 5 grouping or whatever. But you had a story, like somehow you came up with this quartet of poppies, and when you told that story, I attached myself to that story. So
Glad to hear it.
how do you do that?
Well, I've been shooting for 40 years. You learn something along the way. Well, let me tell you this little quick story. I hope this relate. For many, many years, I was worried about, oh my God, is my image is good enough? Are they going to win awards? Are they going to win competitions? And all that kind of stuff. And I don't know when, 20 some years ago. And I honestly, I know this was prompting from my dad at the time, but he was like, let it go. Don't try. Don't force yourself. Just let it be. Create what you see and what you feel. And don't worry about awards. Don't worry about, am I using the right lens? Don't worry about all those things. Just, if you know the equipment well enough, you're going to get a good picture. Concentrate on connecting with the scene. And the minute that I was able to start looking at it that way, and not because, I love you guys dearly, and I'm glad you asked, but the number one question every time we go shoot is, what lens should I take? You know what the real answer is? And I'm not trying to be a smart ass. It doesn't matter. It does not matter what lens you take, because we're not out there taking a picture because of that lens. Now, yeah, there's sometimes a certain lens work better. So I don't mean to be floof about it, as my dad used to say. It's that feeling. It's that connection. It's that, and I will tell you, a tripod to me is a huge benefit when you're in the field, because if you hand hold it, you're holding a brick in between you and the subject, especially if you're photographing people. It hurts my heart to see all these young photographers out there. Well, I shouldn't say young, but all these photographers out there photographing families, hand holding cameras, because they're not connecting. Because the very second they put that camera right back here and start looking at the picture and making changes, they've lost the connection. There's no difference than a flower. There's no difference than a steer looking at you or anything. So it's about connecting with, and I can't tell you how to do that other than just open up here and leave the equipment go. So composition with flowers is, to me, one of the biggest challenges. It is not the easiest thing. The stories will help. So I posted 2 pictures the other day. The one of them was called the quartet, and this one I just showed you was called the lead singer. So in my mind, I was creating this band of poppies, if you will. They'll have several top 20 hits in my mind. And I mean, it sounds silly, but
Yeah.
this fuels the whole thing. And laugh at me if you want, man. If anybody was inside this thing for a while, they would laugh themselves silly, I can tell you. Anyways, long story short, it's creating stories in your mind. Silly, serious, it doesn't matter. Compositions come together that way.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, another question is, are there any specific books that you would cite for reference relative to composition? And Ken Claiborne is
Okay.
asking.
All right, Ken. There are a lot of them. And there's a lot of good ones. I personally have a couple, and I don't know that I've even cracked them, to be honest with you. I was very fortunate in having a father who was an award-winning photographer and understood composition. So I learned from doing. And that's probably the best answer is do this little exercise that I have shared with you guys, and just kind of force yourself to see one element. You don't have to learn all of them. I don't shoot with all of them. I shoot, there's probably honestly 5 or 6 of them that I use regularly, just because that's what I connect to. So it's more about that. The books are so heavy and way too much information. That's why I tried to take this program tonight and just give you 4 lines or 5 lines of something that really boils down to, I know that maybe not doesn't help initially, but certainly it can be that simple. Ken, contact me outside of here, and I'll be glad to chat with you more about it. I'm actually want to put together a hands-on workshop on composition where we can just stand and look at stuff more specific. So keep your eyes out for that too. So,
thank you.
Okay, another question that has come in is, so Rich has asked this, and he said, the rules or the elements seem to be geared to landscape photography. Do they all apply to all forms, say portrait or wildlife? And a portrait seems to violate the rule of thirds generally because it does not use patterns or repetition, that type of thing. So I guess maybe he's asking the question around the rules and how those might apply with portraiture versus landscape.
Okay. Yeah, I would definitely say the rule of thirds is not something I've had luck with people. Maybe kind of a group, but no, I would not even. The rule of thirds is I would that's to me that's it's an easy one to use, but it's not successful most of the time. Portraiture is going to come into S curves and C curves and body tips and head turns and posing people if you got more than one. Even posing a person individually, which is going to come more into a C curve, which is a masculine pose, or an S curve, which is a feminine pose, and bringing those together. I mean, that's a whole other portrait posing workshop I'd love to do for you. So yes, there is some conflicting things there. People, but still, you can look at a group and create some of the elements there of repeating patterns and harmonies and things like that in how you pose people and the positions of the two heads together and where the eyes and the mouth come together in the next person. I mean, it gets pretty scientific, but it's a little different than landscape, I'll tell you that for sure. So
Okay,
rule of thirds, I wouldn't bother with portraits.
All right, perfect. How about, okay, another comment that came in is in the seal and the bird picture, where you have those elements in different parts of the rule of thirds. How does the eye actually know which one to look at? Like, does that compete?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I will tell you that I since I didn't do the golden ratio, the spiral, the conch shell thing we've seen, that works perfectly on that image. I'll show that one again down the line because it brings us from the bird down into the seal and connects them that way. But again, there's different principles, there's different feelings. There's a lot of photographs that do not have a focal point. The whole image is a focal point. There are some that have double focal points. In that particular image, to me, I felt the seal was more important because it was closer, more prominent in the scene, and the eagle was secondary. But because they were both the two living creatures in that scene, that's what tied them together. That's why I was able to get the seal to turn his head the way I wanted him to. No,
you let him.
Yeah, we kept going and bribing him. There's a couple of guys behind the rocks with some fish that to try and get him to look that way. Sometimes you get lucky, kids. Seriously, sometimes you work your ass off, and sometimes you get lucky, and that's what that one really was. It was, and we're on a boat, and we're going like this, and I'm thinking I'm not ever going to get a sharp image. I managed. Oh, the boat. Oh, there, I got it. I was surprised at that image. So to be honest with you, but yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. These are great answers too. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. Thank you. Sure.
Okay, so another question relative to foreground, middle ground, background. And is that the same as layering, or is that something else? And this is another question from Ken.
Okay. Layering is not a compositional element term that I'm aware of. I'm not saying it's not. Again, I can tell you if you do a compositional search on Google, you'll probably come up with something. So I personally have not used the word layering for composition. Having said that, it fits to the foreground, middle ground, background. So that could be something there. But I have not heard the term layering for composition. Sorry, that's about all I can go in there. I will say, though, the foreground, middle ground, background, the theory there sounds like it would match up with what they're trying to say with layering, whereas we're trying to create something close to us, something partway, and something far enough so that the eye visually travels through the scene. Again, a photograph is two-dimensional, right? Height and width. Our job is to create that dimension. So foreground, middle ground, background, or seal and bird looking at each other, things like that. So I'm thinking that's probably what that means. But I have never heard that word used for that, so I'm kind of guessing here. So,
okay. When are you going to the Badlands again? That has been asked.
When do you want to go?
I think
that is that is
Ken
an
was
awesome
asking that
place.
too.
Okay, you let me know when you want to go, buddy. I'll take you up there. That is such a cool place. I mean, I haven't been there since I was a kid, so it was so much fun going back in there earlier this year. And it's funny because we had people. I had a workshop ready to go first part of March, and we had a storm between us and the Badlands that we couldn't get around, and we decided not to go. Um, I want to do that one definitely again next year. It was wonderful in March because we had dusting of snow, which made it that much more interesting with the colors of the rocks. If you've been there, you know how in the middle of the day it's just kind of blah. You get to that early morning or that late afternoon, and these things just wow, it's cool. So you add a little snow to it.
Nice.
So keep your if you don't get my emails, go to soulroadtrips.com, sign up because I'm definitely going to put Badlands back on that trip for next year. And we were even going to take a little side trip on the way home and run over to Devil's Tower and shoot that because a lot of people love that too. So we'll add that to it.
All right. Another question from Jerry, our buddy Jerry. He says, Jerry S. I can never say his last name.
Smith. I just call him Smith. It's easier.
Jerry Stokowski.
Yeah.
If I said that wrong, Jerry, my apologies. But so he was listening to Colleen Minnick from out of the Chicago conference, and she was talking about landscape photography in terms of Gestalt psychology. And do you think that that is a good approach?
I do. I'm not that familiar with it. I know a little bit about it, but it's not something that I use as a tool. Sure, any tool, whether it's mental or a physical tool, the purpose is to get to know it so well that it's second nature. Kind of like I was talking about earlier in the show, sitting down in front of your TV and firing off some shots and not looking at the camera while you change the settings. It's the same idea. If you think if you have interest in it, it's kind of the same with the elements of composition here. You'll pick the ones you like, learn them well, and use them. You don't have to know all of them. So by all means, if that's something I'm not that familiar with to be able to tell you one way or the other about if it's good, bad, or indifferent. So
Okay. Question from Jan regarding the exercise.
okay.
And she said, should I select one element that I connect to or one
Absolutely.
that I struggle with, or maybe one of each?
Yes.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, there's nothing wrong with see the problem that I see with photographers that we get into our little grooves and we shoot the same lens at the same scene. That's kind of why I kind of when people say, well, should I bring a long lens for this or a short lens for this? Yes, is my answer. And they get all frustrated, like, no, tell me what. No, I want you to use this to figure out how to make that lens work well. So I don't mean to be aloof about it, but if you understand one compositional element, do 15, 20 minutes on it, and then pick one you don't, then pick another one you're comfortable with and pick another one you don't. That's just, but to me, it's like, if I don't know it, I'm going to learn it. So I'll go pick the ones I don't know.
Gotcha. Great. Okay. Next question from Joe. He wants to know, some people talk about managing the viewer's eye movement through the screen. How does that intersect with these rules?
Well, it's kind of I think the same principle. If I had another hour, I could have been a little more detailed with some of the actual how to construct a scene, but it happens so fast in my brain when I come upon a scene, something catches my eye. I have a series of questions, which is again something else I'll put out for you guys here real soon, that I go through with a scene, and that helps. Like, what's my focal point? What's my storyline? What do I want the viewer to look at? That helps me design my composition. It helps me to decide if I'm standing in the right spot or not. So it kind of sounds like it's the same idea as what he's talking about in a sense, because what I'm doing is creating a visual playground that I want my viewer to view the way I see the image, what the feeling I had or the story that came to my mind or whatever. I want to compose it in a way that you who hasn't seen that image will make the same journey through the scene. So yeah, that kind of, I think, crosses over what he's saying, if that makes sense.
Yep. Okay, I'm going off script again.
All right.
I have another question, and that is, so I've heard you talk about, you know, in our photographs, we're really creating the scene based on what we see, how that makes us feel, and all of that. Can you, or do you start doing that before you even leave the house? And, you know, where you kind of get yourself familiar with maybe a location, and then you think about that? Or is it more you arrive at the place and, you know, and then you jump in and it becomes all spontaneous?
Yes.
All of that.
A lot of it depends on where I am in my life at the time, what mood I'm in, what I'm wanting to accomplish, what I feel I want to walk away from, or whatever. But more specifically, my routine, there's another, again, you can see my list is growing for videos and such for you guys. Ansel Adams was very famous for his pre-visualization theory. Not theory, it was an exercise that he actually did. I use that very much. It might start at home. It might start from watching a movie. Oh, I see that scene. That's cool. I know where I can go do something like that. It might start as I pull the car up. It may start at home, so I'll think, okay, where can I create this at? Where can I go to do this? Or it may not start until I say, let's pull over here. The sun looks nice, or the temperature is good, or I feel like shooting, and then it might start. So it's kind of whenever, but it's important. The pre-visualization is important because this is the very first step. So when I told you earlier, and those of you who have come with me in workshops, a lot of times how we get out of the car and I tell you to leave your camera gear and we walk into the scene, the woods, whatever, to connect. This is where it begins. The pre-visualization is the next step, because what I'm doing is I'm not only connecting with the scene, the feeling, the atmosphere, whatever, but I'm starting to visualize how I want the photograph to look based on what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing. So it's this interconnected set of tools that I've. It's hard because I use them all the time so well. I'm having a hard time breaking them up to turn around and teach you guys in a way that I could just, well, you know what I'm talking about. No, it's not that easy. But yes, the pre-visualization is huge, because I think, to me, that makes a difference between a nice picture and an award-winning, something I'm proud to hang on the wall. Again, that's something I'll be happy to chat with you more about. I am working on a little program, one of my favorites up front here will be soon. But pre-visualization allows me to stand there and look at a scene, basically visualize what it's going to do, what it's going to look like hanging on the wall at home. That tells me what lens I'm going to use, what exposure, what f-stop, what angle, and so on. Maybe not exactly, but that's why when I walk back to the car, I get that lens, I'm ready with that f-stop and that shutter speed, and I go back and create my image. I'm not out there guessing. Yes, I know I've been doing this for 40 plus years and have shot literally millions of exposures. I hope I know it well enough to be able to do that, but it's a good goal to work for. And if you come with me on any of my workshops, we talk about that stuff, to try and create the art in our mind and then create it in film. That was the long version of the answer, but I hope that helps.
No, that did help.
That was a whole other seminar there, wasn't it?
Well, there was, so we might have to talk about that.
It was a teaser.
So I think that is that's the extent of the questions that we had.
Okay.
So I think, we just will remind people that there will be a recording that will come out. You'll get that in the email here when it becomes available. Sometimes it takes a little while for Zoom to spit it back out after it processes it.
Yeah, that one, what I'm going to do there, what I've done before, is I will download it and process it, and I will put that up on my YouTube page, and I have all of your email addresses from your registration for this program. I will send you an email in the next couple of, I have this workshop I'm teaching, so probably, honestly, won't be till probably Tuesday, just so you know, so hang tight. But I will send you an email with the link to this program, so you'll be able to have a chance to look at this one and the other few that I've done here in the past couple of months. So stay tuned.
Great. Well, and I think, I know from my standpoint, but I think I speak for the group. This was phenomenal. I think it was
What?
really great. I know, people were very engaged, and there was activity in the chat window, so that is all good.
Oh, good.
So
Good.
we just can't thank you enough for sharing your knowledge. We're so happy that you are okay. And
Thank you.